Unbroken, the podcast with Madeline Black, healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with Madeline Black, myself. Today's guest I actually met via social media. We were in a Facebook group and Hannah shared a little bit of her past and I was just intrigued. It was something that I had heard nothing about. Before we speak to her, let me just tell you a little bit about her. She was born in Gloucester and attended the High School for Girls in Gloucester before studying at Loughborough University and then serving in the RAF for 9 years as a personal officer. On leaving the armed forces, Hannah started Toddle, a vegan skincare company for adventurous kids. I've been on their website, parents can go on it as well. It began as Hannah's son had sensitive skin and used to get chapped lips and windburn cheeks when out on their adventures. Hannah has always been adventurous and keen on the outdoors and started making her own protection balm in her kitchen. Toddle received £200,000 worth of investment in 2019. The first 50k winning the Pitch It Wales competition. It sells direct to consumer, to retail and exports to 5 countries. They have also just launched international trust shops and Friends of Jewels, as well as seeing 400% growth on Amazon in the last quarter. So welcome Hannah to the show, lovely to have you here. So that really is your business bio, but it was more your start in life that really intrigued me. And before we get into that, the first question that I ask everyone is what does the word unbroken mean to you?
I don't think that anybody is sort of permanently anything. So I don't think anyone is permanently broken. I think that people are so quick to put labels on themselves and put themselves into boxes. And I just think I'm really fascinated by the brain. I'm really fascinated by how we can improve as people. And I'm sure you know of something called neuroplasticity, where we can basically change our minds, we can change our brains. So I think that for me, that means it doesn't matter what you've been through. You can become whoever you want to become. And there's no reason to sort of carry those labels and any kind of stigma with you. I think that's what it means for me.
And that is absolutely true. When you started to explain to me that you had been ghosted by your parents, by your family, it was something I didn't really know an awful lot about. And you have done so well in spite of in the negative environment that you grew up. Can you explain what your childhood was like and what you mean by being ghosted by your parents?
Yeah, so my childhood was one full of, I'd say, a fair amount of neglect. I think today it probably would have been picked up by social services. Back in sort of the 80s and 90s, there weren't the safeguarding things in place that you see today. So I think then rather than being sort of, like overt physical or sexual abuse, it was emotional and it was neglectful. So it was things like going to school without clean clothes on, never helped with homework, sort of shouted at a lot, slapped. But then I think a lot of my generation were slapped. But there was very little in terms of parenting. We sort of lived in the house, but then that was it. Everything was down to us. So the plus side of that is I became very independent from a young age. I got dressed myself from a young age. There was always food in the kitchen, but I'd go and sort myself out for sort of breakfast and lunch a lot. I'd get myself up for school. I was late to school a lot because there was nobody getting me up. So I think that, yeah, I think it's neglect. And my mum was an alcoholic, so there was a lot of shouting, a lot of emotional disturbance in the house. I suffered with panic attacks from the age of 10. I think that's just how I dealt with it, although I didn't know that at the time. So a really tumultuous childhood, and I think the reason I'm okay today is that my grandmother raised us basically. Anything of fondness that I look back on in my childhood is because my gran raised me. Any nice memories from her, so I think I've got a lot to thank her for, although she's dead now.
Thank goodness, grandma, huh?
Yeah, and then I've got
so much really how they treated you and your brother. It was what they said to you as well.
Yeah, so I mean, we were always told that we weren't wanted and that my mother never wanted children. And actually, she waited till quite late in life to have us. I think societal pressure for that generation to have children, that's just what you did.
What does that do to a child's mind growing up, being told that you were never wanted?
Yeah. So I think it puts you on, you're at a permanent sort of sense of like hyper arousal. You're just always on edge. Like, I've got to try and keep my caregiver happy. So for me, I was very anxious as a child. I constantly thought, well, any moment she could kick us out, because we were threatened with that a lot. And if I didn't do well enough at school, or if I annoyed her, even if I went against something, like even if she had a political view and I asked about it, if I asked the wrong way, I'd be shouted at and told off and threatened with being kicked out. And in fact, my sister was kicked out when she was 17. She went to go and live in a homeless hostel. They threatened my brother with it several times. So yeah,
Why
I
was
think
your sister kicked out at 17? Was there a reason, or
um,
was it good?
I mean, I'd say normal teenage behaviour. I think she was sort of sleeping in bed a bit too much. She dropped out of one of her A levels courses. They weren't happy about that. But honestly, now looking back, no, there wasn't a real reason. It was
Just being a
just
normal 17-year-old.
pretty much, yeah.
This sounds like you just lived or in a state of fear, walking on eggshells most of your childhood.
Yeah, and I think so. I adopted the role of becoming sort of the people pleaser to try and sort of make it as harmonious as I could. Just that was my defense mechanism to get through it, and I still do that now, which is I'm trying to do it less. I'm such a people pleaser now, to my own detriment. And I think that, yeah, I mean, I always knew I wasn't loved deep down, and so I think the way that affected me is that I do struggle with abandonment. I do think people will leave, and then that manifests in me being a bit needier. So I think that yeah, that's how it sort of internalized for me. But yeah, it's really tough growing up, especially when you can see your friends and you can see how much their parents love and support them. They're helping them with their homework. Their parents do a bit of reading with them. And I didn't have any of that, so I probably felt quite jealous as well growing up, looking at my friends.
And it wasn't just that they told you that they never wanted you, any of you. They also told you that if you ever have children, then they'll never speak to you again.
Yes.
Which is the part that when I read your story in that Facebook group, was like, what? How does that make sense? Where does that thought come from? Why would you even say that and think that? It really just shocked me that somebody would say that to their child.
And do you know what? It doesn't make any sense to me. And I think that I've reached a place where it's okay. It doesn't make sense, because I did want to sort of get in their minds and understand them to move forward, but I've moved forward without understanding it. It is weird. We were told growing up constantly, if you have children, I'll disown you. And my mum had this phrase: if you shit on me, I'll shit on you. Sorry for the French. Which is, it makes no sense. I mean, I was a good kid. I got good. I did well in my exams. I played sport nationally. I just tried and tried and tried to get that woman to love me, and to no effect. So yeah, but we were told if you had
it sounds like you could never do enough, because the fault wasn't with you. The fault was with her, that for whatever reason she wasn't capable of loving, or she'd shut that down. I mean, I can't imagine there were, you shared much emotions in the house like that.
No. I mean, I started saying that I loved them when I became an adult, on the phone, like, I love you, sort of thing, to try and get something back. But no, there wasn't a lot of emotion, a lot of hugs, a lot of anything really. We was there, it was shelter. That's all it was. There was nothing beyond that. And now I'm a mother and I've got 2 boys. I realised just how terrible my childhood was, because I wouldn't dream, even if I'm really angry and they've been really winding me up, I would never say to them, I never wanted kids anyway, you've ruined my life.
Well, know better than anyone the impact that would have on a child's mind.
Yeah, they're these little vulnerable, susceptible things, and they take on board what you say.
Yeah, very moldable. They're just like jelly, really, aren't they? We can really infect their minds if we're not careful.
Yeah. So I think since becoming a mother, I've been less, because my mum ghosted me 6 years ago when I became a mother. But like she said she would, she said she'd disown me, and she did. And
it was before that, even though you got married, and did she not come to your wedding?
So she threatened she was going to come, and she did come.
Okay.
And then my sister didn't come. She refused to turn up. I don't know why. She didn't come. But then that was one of the last times I saw my mother. Because I yeah, shortly after I got pregnant, and then had a miscarriage, unfortunately, and then got pregnant again. And it was just after I'd had the miscarriage, I saw her, and she was very off with me, very distant, because I dared to try and have a child when she told us not to. And then, yes, once I'd had my son and he was physically here, that was it. All communication stopped, and they wouldn't answer my emails, Skype calls. They hadn't given me their new mobile phone number. In fact, my husband had to go to the last known address, which they were still at, but that was some years ago now, to go and get all my stuff, because they still had like some of my.
What did they say to him when he came round?
They pretended like nothing had happened, and my husband found it incredibly frustrating, because he tried to say, yeah, Hannah's fine, your grandchild is fine, and they just weren't interested.
And what kind of family does your husband come from? His parents, brothers and sisters?
So his family's great. His mother is really lovely. She's an ex-NHS nurse. His dad is an ex-Metropolitan Police officer. They're responsible, they're loving, they're doting grandparents. And I feel quite bad for them, because there's only one set of grandparents to sort of help, but they're super. They're really
so contrastingly different. You couldn't get more opposite ends of the extreme. So you got married, and then you miscarried, and then you managed to get pregnant again. And from then on, you've never spoken to your mother. She's cut you out of her life.
Yeah, so I mean, I was really, really trying to stay in touch, and it was starting to get me down. I was Skyping, I was trying to organise Skypes or FaceTimes, I was emailing. They weren't, so my mum and dad are still together, and they weren't coming onto Skype. Then it was just my dad, and then my dad stopped coming on. I chased him and say, we said we'd Skype tonight, where are you? And nothing. And then it whittled down, and I sent my final email to say, you've had a grandson, you're welcome to come and see him whenever, love you both very much. This is when I was still trying. This is when I didn't really realise how awful my childhood was before I became a mother myself. So I was still trying, I was still desperate to hang on. My mental health was declining, and I thought, what am I going to be without my
fix it, really, aren't you?
Yeah, really desperate. I mean, if I could go back in time, I wouldn't have done it, but hey, emotions are what they are, aren't they?
It's better to have tried than not to have tried, and you don't want to look back and say, well, I never tried. So maybe it was, not that it ever was your fault, but you've put all the energy into trying to fix this.
Yeah, and I did have some people in my life who perhaps didn't know the situation very well, saying, well, you should try and reach out, be honest. And that's not bad advice. I don't think it was the right advice in that specific scenario. And my in-laws are very, very keen on family. When they first met me, they said, you've got to try with your mother, it's blood and all of this. So I had that coming at me as well. So
that's a bit of pressure.
Yeah, persuaded into sort of trying. But no, that's the last email I ever sent, because then I just got nothing back.
And you went on to have another child.
Yeah, so then Christian came along. So he's 2.5 now, and yeah, that was a slightly different experience, because I'd become a mother. I wasn't reliant on my parents. I've sort of been through a bit of a grieving process, if I'm honest. I've just accepted the fact that they're gone, whether that means through death or through estrangement.
Well, I guess it is a loss, isn't it? It's a loss of them, but it's a loss of how you imagined parents should be, and how you imagined grandparents should be. All those losses and all these pictures that you had of how it could be really haven't materialized in any way, quite the opposite.
Yeah, I think that's exactly it. We've just said it's the grief of what I haven't had. I don't particularly grieve them.
Yeah.
They're not very nice. And when they're in my life, I was quite anxious, and I would get very sort of stressed and anxious if I was going to see them, or just after I'd seen them. So that's gone. I'm happier than I've ever been, actually. Now they're just gone.
So it's quite a relief to let that go.
Yeah. And I've got some friends who've got some difficult relationships with all sorts of different family members, and I suppose I'm sort of grateful in a weird way that I'm just done, and that I've moved past that grief. And don't get me wrong, it was hard. I needed therapy. I cried a lot. I just wanted my parents to love me, but I've reached a point now where I've come the other side of that grief, and I'm actually a lot happier now, which is good.
And what do your boys say? Do they know about their other grandparents? What do they think?
Yeah, so they're 2.5 and 6. So the 6-year-old has asked a couple of times about his other grandparents. I've kept it super simple, but for him, that they're not nice people, so we don't see them, because we don't want nasty people coming near him. they weren't very kind to me, and I've tried to make it relatable. So I say things like, how you get a bedtime story every night, and he's like, yeah, I love a bedtime story. I said, I didn't ever get one, and he sort of looks at me and looks a bit sort of, that's relatable, that's awful that mummy didn't get that. So I don't want to lay it on too thick. It's not his issue, it's not his emotional baggage, it's mine. But I think it's really important to be honest with children, and we're super honest. In fact, I'm not doing too well with the whole Father Christmas thing at the moment, because it's lying, isn't it? But yeah, I'm super honest with him. It's an age appropriate way.
Yeah. So you have a sister and a brother, and I believe your brother also had a child. He was much younger than you, wasn't he? He was 22 and he had a child, and they did the same to him as well.
Yeah, my poor brother. He's super. We're still really close. He's done very well with his career. He's got 2 wonderful children. You should be incredibly proud of how he's raised them. They're really just fantastic. So the oldest one is 11, so he's 34. So yeah, he would have been 22, 23 when she came along. So very young. Went against my parents. They wanted us to go off to university, and I don't know what they wanted us to do. But no, that wasn't in their plan for him. And so they stopped speaking to him pretty much when he turned 23. That was that. They've never met any of their grandchildren, of which they've got 5 now.
Wow. It's really hard to understand, and I would want to understand them, but I guess maybe it's not about understanding, it's just accepting. I guess that's just who they are and how they are, but it just goes against, especially now that you're a mum, all those maternal feelings. It's really hard to understand, okay, you didn't want children, so you had one, but why would you go on and have 3?
Well, I'm a twin, so I think maybe
there was together.
Yeah, plan to maybe have one more, then she accidentally ended up with 3. I think there were 2 things from what you've just said. The first is because people don't understand it. I think initially people look at me and think, well, you must have done something.
No, that was never my feeling. It's the issue clearly lies with them and their inability for whatever reason, because you can't put that on a child. You can't say you were never wanted and make out it was your fault. You're an innocent party in all of this.
Yeah, well, thanks for saying that, because I do feel like sometimes people look at me like I've got 2 heads when I say that, my mother's not in touch. So I think she had undiagnosed postnatal depression after having us twins, because she had a 3-year-old and then tiny twins came along. I don't know if she had tons of support. I know she worked 2 jobs, but they didn't have much money. So I don't think it excuses her behaviour, because people have been in all sorts of dire situations and treated their children far better. But I do think that her mental health took a big dive, and she should have had treatment. And so she chose to become an alcoholic. She chose to basically
medicating.
Yeah,
it's very sad, really, because, well, for me, I'm a mum of 3 kids. I have a wonderful mum who's a great grandparent, and she's just missing out, in my opinion. But I guess she comes from it at a very different place.
I think she's protecting herself in some weird way that she understands, because she doesn't have any friends. It's not she doesn't talk to any family members now at all. It's just my dad, if they're still alive, that is. I'm really not sure. So yeah, I think it's about protecting her, because then no one can hurt her if she just never talks to anybody.
It just sounds such a sad and lonely existence, really, for somebody, doesn't it?
Yeah, I'm an extrovert. I love my friends. I love my family. I'm pretty good at keeping in touch with friends and family. I like having people around me. So yeah, it just doesn't compute, really.
But it seems that you have got a lot of learning out of this, and you've gone out of your way to be the opposite. And in spite of your parents and your upbringing, you're thriving now and you're doing really well in business. I'm wondering, when you went to the RAF, was that like a family for you?
Yeah, so I think that I was a bit wayward. I was probably a bit feral, and I wasn't very disciplined. I probably wasn't very motivated. I was motivated enough to get through A levels, and I got through my degree. But it was stepping foot in the RAF, and this is not an advert for the RAF. I don't work for them anymore. But it really was a place where I felt like I finally belonged. I had a lovely sense of community. I had to be somewhere on time. I had to be there dressed in uniform at the required standard, which required a lot of work. We were up till 11 o'clock midnight at night, cleaning our rooms, sorting out our kit, up at sort of 5 in the morning to do the same. And so it was a really sort of regimented, especially the first couple of months in the RAF, where they sort of get you into the military mindset. There's no excuse. You just have to get up to the required standard, and if you don't, they'll just get rid of you. There's no room for, oh well, I didn't do this because of this, or being lazy. So I think it worked. I think I had potential, but because I was probably quite unmotivated, and I could be quite anxious and poorly organised, the RAF sort of got, I think, what was there out of me by putting me into this like regimented, routine, safe, even though it's the armed forces, safe structure. So yeah, I really sort of thrived in the RAF, and I really enjoyed it, and I loved my time. I did 9 years, which was perfect for me. Then I had a family. Pardon?
It's quite a while, 9 years.
Yeah, I came out because I had a young family, and the business was starting to grow, and it was a bit of a do or die with the business really. I either leave and grow this, or it's never going to be quite what it could be. So
And it was while you were there that you also got good emotional support as well.
yeah, so the armed forces actually, having left and seen what it's like when you're not in the armed forces, they provide a lot of mental health support, and if you need help, you get it very quickly compared to the NHS. So I was very fortunate to have CBT, which helped me a lot, and my mental health has generally been quite good for many years. But I think just to put some of those demons to bed was quite important. I think it's very hard to have my upbringing and not have some kind of therapy or help. So yeah, I found, and I had some really great bosses. In fact, I had one boss, his dad had ghosted him, and he and I had a chat, and he helped me through it. And yeah, I think actually the armed forces, for the flack it gets, I think sometimes, I found it to be a super support.
They became aware of your anxiety and pointed it out to you, didn't they? One particular person.
Yeah, so I had a boss who sort of, I was probably not performing that well at work, because this was many years ago. My anxiety was getting quite bad. This is when my parents were still in my life. My mum had tried to kill herself, and I was just all over the place a bit emotionally, thinking maybe it was my fault, because so much of my parents' sort of unhappiness, I was told it was my fault. And a boss noticed. He sort of got me to one side, and what started off as a bit of a telling off ended up with me coming clean and saying how I really felt. And he made sure that I got counselling that same day from a company called Safa, who are a charity. And he got me an appointment with Padre, which is like the station vicar, although they're not particularly Christian. It's just support for anybody. And they got me on the straight and narrow, really. They made sure I had the support. Because I think, like anyone, you don't get mental health support when you need it. You get it when it's too late, like a lot of people.
But when we're in crisis, I guess we don't really see it, do we? It's hard to see it. When we step out, you go, oh, yeah, that was really difficult.
Looking back now, I wasn't eating properly. I'd lost about a stone. I only weigh 7.5 stone anyway.
There's not much of you anyway.
No, and I was turning up to work late because I just was not sleeping. I was maybe getting like an hour or two of sleep. It got pretty bad. And so, yeah, looking back, that I needed somebody to say, you need to go and see someone. And it's not an easy conversation to have with a member of staff, but he did, and I'm ever so grateful.
Yeah, no, it's amazing how you have really turned it all around, and we started speaking about the neuroplasticity and how you've changed your mindset. Can you tell us a little bit more about that journey?
Yeah, I think when I was growing up, my parents were very much, you stay in your box, and you don't be too ambitious, because they really didn't amount to much, even though they're both actually quite intelligent. They could have done, but for being just bone idle and not being motivated, their work ethic was appalling. I was raised with a shocking work ethic where they'd pull a sickie wherever they could. It's us against the system sort of vibe. It's in complete contrast to my husband's upbringing, where he said it's age 4 or 5 he wanted to be a pilot, so his parents made sure he went to RAF cadets. They bought some flying lessons for him if he saved up a certain amount of money. They were super supportive, and the sky's the limit, son, sort of thing.
Supportive and nurturing, I guess that's the difference.
Yeah. And then I remember once my brother was having a conversation with my dad when my brother said, oh, I want to earn, I don't know, £40,000 when I'm older, because he heard of a job where he could get £40,000. And back in like the 90s, that was a lot of money. It still is. And my dad was like, where do you think you're going to get that kind of money? I'm only on 28,000. There's no way you can get that kind of money. Like, come on, son. And I can tell you now, my brother earns a lot more than that, because he's
You were never encouraged, really.
No, but we
The best.
yeah, I feel like it was almost, we had because we were like working class, not lower middle class, working class. You can't get out of that, Hannah, know your place sort of thing. So I think I've changed my mindset. I think especially from being in the Royal Air Force.
I don't think you definitely have changed your mindset.
Yeah, because you can join the RAF as a most junior rank is a senior aircraftsman, SAC, and you can be chief of the air staff. If you just keep getting promoted, you can. So it's in the RAF, you are taught, it doesn't matter who you are, get the qualifications, get on the courses that you need, get those promotions in. Yeah, there's nothing holding you back because of class, or there's no social mobility issue or anything like that. So,
and it doesn't matter what your start has been like. It's really more about where you finish, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. So now I probably started off in the business world a bit thinking, oh, I don't know how big this will get. Who am I to know anything about business? But we've won awards. I got the investment. You know, I've started working with some big retailers. I now run a successful business, and the sky's the limit. I want to be a multi-million-pound business. I want to be a global brand, and that is starting to happen.
And
so
listening to you now, I have every faith that you will do that. You can hear that determination, and it is, in spite of where you started, it's incredible.
Well, thank you. Well, something that I do think, it's not a very articulate way of saying it, but because I've had such a rubbish start, and when your own mother doesn't love you and you've got to move past that, and you do go quite low, not sleeping, eating, whatever, I just think nothing's as bad as that. If this business fails, so what? I'll start another one, I'll get a job, so what? So nothing is as bad as what I personally have been through emotionally. So I can start a business. If something bad happens in the business, I've had all sorts of failures within the business. Where I am now is just a result of many failures.
Absolutely.
And anything that's happened, say we haven't got a retailer we can go in after for months, say a pitch doesn't resonate with an investor and they say no, I run out of money for whatever reason, I get a manufacturing bill which is double what I thought it would be because of exchange rate, whatever. We've had some pretty like big things happen, and I am affected by it. I do find it hard, but I am very good at just dusting myself off and saying, right, here's how we're going to fix it, here's what's next. And I think one of the only reasons I'm still here as a business, I started with quite a few businesses as part of a cohort in an incubator that I worked at. One of the only reasons I'm still here is because I just haven't stopped. I think some of them who had better business ideas than me, certainly better business acumen, have had that failure and they've gone, well, that's it, I can't get past this. Whereas I've just kept going. And I think that resilience does come from having a tougher start, to be honest.
Yeah, that was the very word I was going to use. Your not great start has really taught you resilience, hasn't it? And it's shown you a strength that you've got and a determination that I'm going to do this, and pretty unstoppable, actually.
That is part of the problem, though. I think being the daughter of an alcoholic that doesn't love you, when is it enough? So I need to make sure I'm doing it for the right reasons. I'm doing it for me, I'm doing it for my family. I'm not doing it to be rich or famous or to somehow get acceptance or love somewhere else. I've got to do it for me, and I've got to do it.
When will you know it's enough? When will you know?
The thing, that's what I do struggle with. I am a bit of a workaholic. I need to, I have started putting my family first over the work, and I think that's when it's enough. When it starts to impact on my family, my husband sometimes has to say, you've done too much on the business this week, a 60-hour week or whatever, and then not spending enough time with them. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard when you've grown up, when nothing is enough.
Yeah, and it is hard when you're self-employed and it's your own business and you want to put in all the hours and make it the best that you possibly can as well. But I guess everything is about balance, isn't it? Finding that balance and that work-life harmony.
And I mean, I'm sure you're the same. It's about sustainability, isn't it? You can't keep doing 60-hour week. You just can't, and it's not a badge of honor to do it. I think people you myself, I've been a busy fool. I need to be smarter with my time and delegate more. And
How do you look after yourself then? Do you take time off for Hannah?
I do now. I've got staff now. We're a team of 5 now, and I have started taking time. It's hard, but I think if I do, I love running and I play hockey, and if I do take the time to go out running, or I play a few hockey matches or whatever for my local side, my mental health is so much better, and then I feel reinvigorated to go back at the business. I don't come up with my best ideas when I don't have a break. So yeah, I've got slightly better. We had a little family holiday last month up to Scotland, a couple of days up in the Highlands.
As I live in Scotland, I would say that's a very good place to come to.
Absolutely adore Scotland.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
It's very.
I remember you're not there for the weather.
No, well, do you know what? We were really lucky actually. It was, as long as it doesn't rain, because you expect it to be a bit chilly, don't you? But yeah, it's stunning. Yeah, so I do try, but I bet you're the same. I bet you struggled with time off.
Well, I have to say, as a speaker, my calendar has kind of emptied this year, which is why I'm doing my podcast, because all my speaking events had me traveling around the world. So that's kind of stopped. So that's a shame. But hey, this is brilliant as well, to speak to people that have transformed their life. And you really are an example of transforming your life. I'm just wondering, before we get to the end of our podcast or our interview here, do you have any tips for anyone that's maybe been in a similar situation, or any advice you would give to someone that's listening now that's struggling?
I think specifically, if anyone is, if you're the only one giving in a relationship, whatever that is, like, you need to set boundaries. Mm-hmm. If somebody is, a net taker from you, like my parents were, I was just giving and giving and giving and like wearing myself out and killing my mental health. I think that if I was to give myself advice, it would be to put boundaries in place, get therapy and get out. Nobody is worth that, family or not, whatever anyone else tells you. And you're not alone. The amount of people that have come forward to me since I've, because I run a business, we have quite a few followers, and I am very honest, because I think it's important as a small business to show the fullness of the business. We're humans at the end of the day. We're not some huge corporate giant. And since I've been sharing more of my journey, the amount of people that have come forward and said, yeah, my dad ghosted me. I have had some other people who've said their mums ghosted them as well. And so it's really nice to know I'm not alone. And
but it must be hard when it's Mother's Day, Father's Day, and all you see are the cards and the images of, happy parenting and being a child, and you think it's not like that for everyone.
No, I mean, I haven't yet, but I have almost posted on Mother's Day to say, here's my situation. I'm here for all the people who have the terrible.
I think it's important to raise that as well, because whether they've been ghosted or not everybody started in a happy childhood. It's it won't be an uncommon story for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that even those who are still in touch, there's a lot of complicated relationships out there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I think know that you're not alone, and know that just because they're family doesn't mean you have to stay in touch and have a relationship. And therapy, you can't, it's very hard to move on without it, and move on yourself. To get that professional help is just so important.
Absolutely. Well, I think that is a great place to end. So thank you so much, Hannah, for taking the time out of your busy schedule and coming on the show. And I would just recommend to everyone to go and have a look, especially read your blog posts. They're brilliant. They really just bring the company alive. They're really lovely to read. I like the one about the bees and making the nests. It was cute. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks so much for having me. It's great to have sort of a way to share this stuff, and hopefully it can help somebody.
There's no hope. It definitely will help someone, that you can absolutely turn your life around. It doesn't matter on your start. It's now what matters. So thank you for sharing that.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeline Black.